ease of doing business in logistics, discussing role of policies. We would like to begin by thanking you all for being a part of Logistics Tech Conference. It is my pleasure to introduce you to the esteemed panelists, Suman Bose, co-founder, GoFar Advisory and Investments, who will be moderating this discussion, Joy Basu, CEO, SmartshipHub, Vijay Kumar, CEO, Express Industry Council of India, Shamsher, Dewan, Vice President and Group Head, Corporate Ratings, ICRA, Arijit, Vice President, Government Affairs and Public Policy, VIVO. Over to you, Mr. Bose.
Thank you. It's great to have you all in the afternoon, joining in from different parts of the country. And the topic today is, in perspective, what this eminent panel is going to discuss about is primarily the role of policy as we face due to seemingly two different tasks, but all united in one, which is make India most efficient as logistics. In terms of the cost, in terms of efficiency, in terms of what we deliver as a part of the supply chain, integrated supply chain. I think there's a lot that India needs to do, and that lot has been done and a lot needs to be done. To see it from a perspective, Indian logistics industry, which is possibly one of the largest industry globally, logistics industry globally, still has to become very efficient, literally half the cost from a GDP perspective, but nevertheless keep with the trajectory of a 10% plus CAGR, which the industry is seeing. It's a phenomenal industry and a space to be in, a phenomenal space to innovate. But all this innovation needs government to be right in the middle. And we know over here, it's when we say government in the middle, government intervenes through policy, government interferes through the directives. That we saw a very positive budget, this budget, where the finance minister spoke about the initiatives that we need to take. The country, she's putting in the money in the right spaces, whether it's in terms of infrastructure, whether it's in terms of digitalization, etc. But it now needs to become a reality. The directives needs to become a reality. And today we have with us a panel which from the rating agency to the industry council to entrepreneurs and to people working in the corporate, to give you a view of where they see this impetus going, where they see it needs to go, and leave a few comments. So without much further ado, I will take it into and invite, as I speak, first Vijay. Vijay, if you would like to quickly introduce yourself and give your quick comments on where you think the top priorities and where the industry needs to go. I see Vijay, actually, I've lost Vijay on the screen. So I'm going to not stop over here. We'll see when Vijay joins in. So over to you, Joy. Joy, if you could introduce yourself and give the top comments of what you think are the priorities from a policy perspective, and in respect to where the logistics industry is headed to.
Sure. So thank you, Suman. I represent SmartshipHub. We are a maritime digitalization platform, and we connect ships around the world. So we enable ships in the same way avionics helps aircrafts move around the world, both in terms of logistics, in terms of cargo, in terms of passenger liners. So as a smart ship representative over here, we started off our entire initiative from India, and very soon we have to move to Singapore. And that brings us to the point that why would a startup which gets started off in India has to move on to another shores? So that brings us to the point also, what kind of opportunities do we have that we have so far probably failed to capitalize on, and what is it that organizations around the world based out of Hong Kong, Singapore, Athens, North Americas are doing. So I would have a couple of points, time permitting would like to bring it on, but want to bring out a couple of quick highlights rather. That India has one of the largest coastline in the world, and compare it with Singapore or Hong Kong, which would be probably the size of a large city that India has in terms of shoreline, but it is just comparable in the quantum of business that we do out of that. So with that, having said, as a smart ship representative that we work with ship owners and ship operators and ports and yards, at least the kind of ecosystem we are building in, we would really love to see certain policies in the areas of station in the areas of communication, which is like satellite communication. It's completely barred in many ways in India. I'm told it's opening up. It's in the areas of how the digitalization can be promoted. And furthermore, if there is any kind of private interaction that could be brought in that we are very used to seeing in so many other countries. So happy to elaborate and want to listen more about what others have to say.
Okay, thanks, Joy. Thanks for that crisp introduction. Vijay, we had just lost you when we were starting off, so over to you to give your introduction and the key point that you would like to make over here. Vijay, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Suman, and good morning, everyone. I represent the express industry, which is a critical sector, especially from a B2C perspective. We the e-com environment developed because there was express industry. So there are a couple of key points that we would like to place. I would go directly into into the pain points that some of the carriers go into. One of the key points that I would like to raise is GST related, and that's with e-invoicing coming in, we would like to see if we could have if we could phase out e-way bill, that would be a big plus point. The second point would be related to cross-border international movements. Again, B2C. Our B2C exporters are probably a very vibrant sector which can be tapped, and our exports could grow manifold. And there we have a few points related to customs, where if it is handled and if the policy interventions are correct, we could have that sector growing in a huge way. And of course, one of the big things that we are looking for is next month the drone policy is going to be notified, and we believe that that could be a game changer for the industry. Thank you.
Wonderful, Vijay. Wonderful for your insights. And I'll jump into Arijit. Arijit, you have spent time with the industry association. Now you're with the corporate. How do you see this, the effective role of policy that would help overall in the industry and specific to the company and the sector that you currently represent?
So thank you, Suman. And first of all, thanks to IMAI for allowing me to become a part of this panel. So Suman, the interesting thing is that for logistics in our country, there is no one hat fits all kind of an answer. This is a situation where there is a clear interplay between the various ministerial departments, and they all have to join hands along with industry to make this a success. Over the last couple of years, there's been some tremendous success stories and also some very good policy moves by the government. For example, the government has made a move to introduce freight smart cities. That's going to have a tremendous impact because this policy will help, hopefully, to overcome the impediments currently existing between interstate movement of goods. It will also help to streamline processes and reduce the traffic time at the key terminals. The other thing that the government has done in a good sense is the reduction of certain customs duties, where the finance minister in her last budget had announced reduction in BCD of import of certain, duties. However, we need to recognize the fact that we are not in a position to sort of pat ourselves on the back as yet, because we are competing against global economies that have a much more significant and a much more dynamic control over their logistic arenas, whether it be our neighboring country, or whether it be Singapore, as Joy mentioned, or whether it be Hong Kong. The turnaround times are a fraction of what we have achieved so far at our ports, for example. And we have been actually patting ourselves as a country on the back, because The turnaround time at our ports has reduced drastically. From an earlier, when I first started off, I remember it used to be almost 12 days, 14 days, then it became 6 days. Now it's come down to 24 hours to 48 hours. It's a significant improvement. But we need to recognize we're competing with economies that do a TAT in 4 hours or maybe even less. So there is certainly some aspects which we need to sort of relook at, revisit in order to streamline further. And that's where perhaps in the second round, when we talk and get into a bit more depth, I can talk about how, the Department of, for example, Civil Aviation, Ministry of Shipping, the law and order enforcement agencies, the security issues, the kind of support we require from Ministry of Finance, all tie together for a successful logistical implementation. So I'll leave it here for now. Back to you.
Oh, thanks, Arijit. Thanks for bringing out the big elephant in the room, which is, no matter what we do, we will have global competitors, and that's going to be a very important point as we go into the second part of the conversation. And before we round off this part, Shamsher, over to you to give a perspective from ICRA, as well as your other experiences that you've had out of the industry. How do you see the policy interventions that have been done, and what is needed, and what is the impact of that on the competitiveness of the Indian industry per se in the global context?
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for giving us an opportunity to share our thoughts and views on the logistics sector. I would tend to agree with all the points that have been raised by the esteemed panel members here. Now, just to add to what has already been said, coming from a rating agency, I would like to talk about the financing constraints that the logistics sector faces. Now, as one can easily imagine that logistics as a sector is extremely capital intensive, whether it comes to the transportation piece or it comes to the warehousing and the storage and infrastructure. Now, if you would recollect, sometime in November 2017, the government had taken a very right step of giving infrastructure status to the logistics sector. Now, that included certain categories of the ecosystem, which included inland container depots, wherein minimum investment of 50 crores was mandated. It also included cold chain facilities and certain warehousing facilities as well. Now, around the same time, the government also initiated another excellent step, which was to form a separate logistics division, under the Ministry of Commerce, to look at logistics as a pure play integrated sector rather than, as Arijit clearly mentioned, that, it is being managed by different ministries at different time intervals. Now, one of the constraints that we still face is that, uh, the development of multimodal logistic parks have still not taken up the way it was envisaged and aspired to. Now, clearly, I think a lot of work still needs to be done on the financing ecosystem, wherein while we have given the infrastructure status, but how is it that we can channelize low cost and long-term funding into the sector by opening up foreign investments through various different forms, like what has happened in the infrastructure sector using the InvITs, and it is also happening in the real estate sector using REITs. Can we look at certain dedicated funds which can invest in the logistic infrastructure, which is a complete interplay of the integrated model? So that's one point that I would like to touch upon. Second is that over the last couple of years, the government has actually become extremely serious and focused about the carbon footprint that we have. And on that front, clearly there is a lot of focus to ensure that we move towards different sources of mobility, including electrification, especially for commercial fleets and last mile delivery vehicles. Now, if you talk to industry participants on what is the key bottleneck that they have in terms of ensuring faster adoption of electric vehicles in the last mile delivery platform, is the need of financing again. Now, I think a lot of work needs to be done again to create an environment where the financiers come on board and they are happy to finance vehicles which are electric without worrying too much about what happens to the residual vehicle value after 3 or 4 years of lifespan. So I think a lot of work needs to be done on that front to be able to create an ecosystem to take care of the carbon footprint that we are worried about.
Okay, thanks, Shamsher, for giving your views on it. So I have grabbed I think the audience also has grabbed the key points, and we will see if questions come in. But let me now come back to you itself to start with, Shamsher. You talked about. I mean, the key point that you've talked about is, if you're giving in the sector an infrastructure status, it has to follow with the right set of financing that is available. And this is especially when globally the cost of money has fallen. Countries and after countries which have gone into zero or even negative interest rates. How do we shore them in? How do we create a capital structure which is truly a project financing capital structure? That means the financing is on the viability of the project and not on entrepreneurs, personal house and car being on lien to the bank, which is what ends up happening for a project financing. It's truly for a long term, which is a 20-year, 25-year kind of financing, or at least a 15-year kind of financing, and not a 7-8 year. Because most Indian projects, for example, by the time they're just about showing profitability, they need to refinance. And we have seen how refinancing can create a huge distress in assets. And companies, organizations like ICRA, which are rating agencies, play a very important role for creating the transparency in the project finance that is needed for Indian projects to be truly bankable by the international project finance organizations, or create such project finance organizations in India. With this as a segue, how would you like to elaborate this point of financing as a true kind of a level playing field for the Indian logistics sector that needs to come in as a part of the policy intervention by the government? Over to you, Shamsher.
Sure. So, Suman, you rightly mentioned, I think project finance is one area where I think a lot of deliberation needs to be done. And historically, if you see that, India has relied too much on its banking sector for financing the corporate, the industries, and the infrastructure sector. Clearly, if you draw a benchmark or global standards on financing of projects, banks don't play a major role. It's the capital
Yes.
markets that play a much bigger role. While a lot of work has been done on that front, and we have seen in the past 2 to 3 years, a lot of new investment vehicles have come up, such as InvITs and REITs, as I mentioned in my opening remarks. But I think there are still a lot of bottlenecks which need to be addressed, particularly addressing to very core specific sectors, and logistics is one of them. Now, some of the three, four important points that needs to be taken into consideration is, as you rightly said, that the role of promoters should be limited from providing security. I think the asset itself should be used as a major collateral. The role of promoters should be more of bringing in the upfront equity, long-term equity. Second is that these assets need to be treated from a long-term perspective, wherein at least 10 to 15 years kind of funding has to be brought in through investment routes, and there has to be a fair share of both domestic money as well as foreign money, which has to really come into the sector. Recently, you would have seen that some of the regulatory authorities are also looking at allowing investment vehicles to go public even before they have actually disclosed their mandate or objective of raising money. I think steps like those, when married with the infrastructure status that the sector enjoys, will go a long way in addressing some of the financing constraints that it has.
Okay, so one question that comes over here, and I think this question has also been raised by somebody in the public, is some of our listeners at this point of time, is what has been the real impact of the Union Budget 2021 specifically on the policies that has been done on the logistics industry? Because there was a slew of policies that was announced by the FM during her budget 2021 budget.
Well, all the steps were certainly in the right direction. I would say that, even including the introduction and thought process of having a national logistics policy, I think that's something which is a welcome step. I would say, I think still early days to really comment upon, have things really moved on ground. It's still early days, I would say. What is really working well is that, one of the challenges which our logistics sector has faced is that we have high cost of overall logistics. And one of the reasons is that we have high dependence on road. Over the last 10 to 15 years, the share of road has only gone up, while share of railways has come down, barring the essential commodities, which are the bulk commodities which are managed by railways. But what we've seen in the last 1 year or so is that the share of railways again is inching up, and some of the policy initiatives which have been taken to really be able to plug the gap where they lack compared to the road sector, I think is working well. We now see increasingly the non-bulk cargo also moving towards railway. And I think once in fiscal 2023, especially when the Western Dedicated Freight Corridor comes into action, we'll see much more, traction happening towards the railways. Though there are a lot of uncertainties there too as to how the charges will play out between railways and DFCC. What happens to availability of containers? Will private sector be really, coming back in action and running those trains, etc.? Many things need to be answered, but I think we are seeing good momentum happening on the railway side, especially in terms of gaining back traction, and on the road infrastructure creation side also. I think there was significant allocation increase of, I think, about 28%, which seems to be panning out well.
Okay, so thanks again. And now, I mean, if you have time, I'll come back on the financing to be one of the core aspect on which both policy and intervention is needed to create the right kind of financing model and right kind of risk profile for that financing model, infrastructure financing model, which I think India lacks severely when compared to the competitors that we spoke about, which Arijit spoke about. So Arijit, that's a segue for my question to you. You talked about interministerial coordination, and we recently saw the Prime Minister announcing a Ministry of Coordination and Cooperation. Yes. And with that in the backdrop, I would like you to elicit, if possible, a few examples of what could be done as an example of an efficient government and policy implementation in this sector.
Sure. No, thank you. Thank you for raising this, Suman, because, we from the electronics industry specifically feel this is something which is critical to our growth and development in the country. I'll give you some 3-4 brief examples, 2-line examples, so that you and the audience at large can understand what I'm talking about. For example, most of the components that the electronics industry uses comes in either from China or Vietnam or from Taiwan. And that is a fact that most of these come in and then these are assembled in our country. Now, because of the Indo-ASEAN FTA, the imports that come in, for example, from Vietnam, enjoy zero duty of imports. And there is, of course, a lot of scrutiny from our government to ensure that this FTA is not being misused by other countries who may want to take such a zero duty approach. Absolutely fine. The challenge starts when the system, the process is such that once there is an import that happens, it comes into the country, it rests at the port at customs. At that point, our ministry from the finance ministry is required to send a request across to the Vietnamese government. They in turn give a certification back after checking with the exporter from their country that yes, this particular goods has been sent across and it does have 35% or more localization. And once the certificate is received by the Indian government, then customs lets those goods come inside. Now the challenge occurs where these requests from the ministry sort of are kept on hold over a period of time till they accumulate to a certain amount of critical mass, and then it is sent off in one single lot to the government of Vietnam. I'm giving this just as an example. It could be any other country, but this is a tried and tested process. Now, this results in a delay of, almost a quarter sometimes. And a quarter is, you live or die by the quarter in electronics industry. You can't afford to sort of, lose out a full quarter for lack of because then your production comes to a halt. So the way that the industry has been gearing up for this is they order it in by the bulk and they stock up. But that is not really very, very, you know, I mean, it's sustainable, but it's not an ideal situation because that's not the way that good just-in-time operates. Similarly, there are, and this is squarely with the Ministry of Finance, just as an example. Similarly, when you have, inadequate air connections, air connectivity flights due to limited airspace by the airlines, this results in a number of flights obviously being less, which results in turn into higher air freight. Now, there is absolutely no reason why one cannot apply for more connectivity, but then it is the Ministry of Civil Aviation that looks into this. And they have to sort of coordinate with their counterparts in the other countries. A third example for, one of, I think Shamsher mentioned about the roadways, the trucking situation. The harmonization of our land, air, and sea freight has not happened. And the reason I say this is because, for example, the Motor Vehicle Act, which has come in from the British era and it is a legacy act which is still followed, that does not recognize certain material as non-hazardous even today. One clear example is, for example, the printer ink that comes in for any printer. The air cargo recognizes it as a normal process. The shipping industry recognizes it, so there's no need for it. The moment it gets onto a truck, unless it is labeled as hazardous material, you are in default of the law. So you can bring it in over air, you can bring it in by sea. The moment it's on your truck to be taken by road, how can the categorization change? I mean, these are things which have to be harmonized. Air, land, and sea have to work together. These are three different departments, I understand, but this is where, as you mentioned, Suman, the Ministry of Coordination has to play a very, very key role, because for a company to then address it at its own level, at three different levels, becomes a nightmare. So I'll pause here if there are questions, if any.
No, that's a wonderful example that you gave, Arijit, and it makes it so lively to understand the impact of what a lack of harmonization can do. The simple categorization of a product, and with that, given that Vijay, in your opening comment, you spoke about the express industry, how it has been the backbone of the B2C and the e-commerce industry, and you spoke about the issues of GST. You spoke about the drone policies that's about to be notified, and I'm really waiting for a drone someday to come to my window and deliver me just-in-time stuff for my maybe cup of coffee. But nevertheless, that's a topic we will have some other day. But from your perspective, how does this pan out when you're talking about the express industry? This coordination or the lack of coordination or need for better coordination, and what does it mean for the industry per se today and looking forward in the future? What are your key asks would be for policy to help streamline this industry and make it much more efficient in the global class? Please unmute yourself, Vijay. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Suman. Let me start off by saying that there has been a lot of good also that has come in, and also from an intention point of view, you were mentioning about the budgets, or for that matter, the recent changes in the GST, architecture, wherein they introduced the e-invoicing. So there are a lot of good things that are happening, but however, at the same time, there needs to be an ecosystem that needs to actually be built around this, where the industry can, the impact on the industry goes up. Now, for instance, let's take this e-invoicing that GST is now mandated, that anybody over 100 crores need to have e-invoicing coming in. Now, with e-invoicing, your requirement for e-way bill actually should not be there. The moment you have e-way bill out and you can move shipments through an e-invoicing document, the impact that we as logistics service providers would have is quite a bit. Added to that fact is also that e-invoicing also talks about a QR code. Now with the QR code, you are actually eliminating the entire physical movement of the physical requirement of documents. Just with a QR code, you can actually move your shipments because whatever is there in the invoice is captured in the code. However, again, today you don't know how to actually generate a QR code on the e-invoicing. So there are quite a few things that probably the regulators need to look into. I'll also take taking on from what Arijit had said. Actually, there is today a Department of Logistics, which is already there. And it is this Department of Logistics which actually should be, should get involved in ensuring that this coordination between various ministries, whether it is rail, road, air, shipping, there are, and probably even the finance ministry should actually be spearheaded by the Department of Logistics. If that happens, then I think it would be it would really help in a large way for us to move forward. Because as far as we are concerned, there are 2 or 3 key. In fact, all the ministries that we are talking about becomes key for us. Whether it is rail, whether it is finance because of customs, or whether it is road and air. And on
one question. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Vijay.
I would also like to put in one aspect of customs. Customs has done a lot of work. Our, the ease of doing business, one of the major reasons why our ranking has gone up is primarily because of customs reforms. However, there still needs to be quite a bit of work that customs would need to do. One is the KYC that is required. When you bring in a shipment, especially from a B2C perspective, when you bring in a shipment for, the clearances get delayed because there is a requirement for KYC. Now, I can understand the revenues, requirement, Department of Revenue's requirement that KYC needs to be there because they need to know if these are genuine imports. What would be required is probably for the regulator to create a common portal wherein I can go and register myself like a CKYC or whatever. So anybody who brings in shipments that is meant for me, I just go there and download that and then clear shipments. Or probably the e-com marketplace actually collects these KYC documents. So these are some of the thoughts that I had. Yeah, Suman, you were trying to ask me some questions.
So my point on that is, you spoke about the drone policy, and we know that drones are not just those funny things that flies in Indian marriages taking in pictures, but they have long-term views. We've been seeing how Airbus is actually right now going through the test phases of human movement using drones, large drones, which can potentially replace, and create the whole market for city taxis. So with the drone policy notification, what are the key expectation that the express industry has from the drone notification?
So the draft policy looks good, and we are hoping that that policy would be notified post 5th of August. I mean, they've asked for public comments till 5th of August. So we are hoping that somewhere in August that notification would come in. Post that, there would obviously be a lot of experimentation that the companies would do in terms of what would be the right way of dealing with it. But some quick comments that I can have is that, for instance, if we had this, ecosystem in place last year, you could have gone into the containment zones without actually putting the community at risk. You can deliver medicines, you can deliver your B2C shipments without the need for for being for being cautious about going and doing deliveries into some of these places. Plus it also would help in a big way in the currently unserved rural markets. where getting into smaller communities, smaller villages sometimes are a problem because your road is not properly done. Going there could be a big hassle. So if you had a drone actually which can go and deliver into these remote villages, it's a big plus point. So I would say it would definitely be a game changer as far as my industry is concerned. We have seen quite a bit of action on the international sector on this. Some of our member companies have already started using drones in some of the countries. And we would obviously, our companies would take that as a learning, and they would definitely be moving forward.
Sure. And I personally have seen how, for example, in Africa, there are some of the drone companies which tested out critical supply chains, including blood, emergency blood movement, and yeah, absolutely, and how that has changed the face of it. But that also needs, for a drone to be effective, it also needs very strong communication network, and not necessarily a 3G, 4G, 5G kind of a network. It's even beyond. And that brings in the point that, Joy, you raised on satellite communication, for example, making it essential part to serve the large coastline that India has. And while rail is inching up, there is a need to have a better utilization of our waterways, both inland as well as external waterways, the coastline waterways, etc. Sometimes the funny thing that many of us don't realize is it's cheaper to ship through rail to a port, then take it around the country, and then get it back onto the port, onto a train, and then ship it to the last mile. So use rail as the last mile and the ships as at the mid mile or the long haul stuff. So with this point of satellite communication becoming an essential infrastructure that India needs, how do you see the Indian waterways to be better utilized for bringing out efficiency, streamlining efficiency, and bringing more efficiency into the Indian logistics sector?
Hey, thanks, Suman. So something I want to share from my personal experience, and one thing we've realized while working with Global Maritime, and especially the logistics, is the logistics in shipping is not about the goods in transit or import and export. In fact, it is the entire support system around it. So just to give you an example, a ship coming into India and staying for 2 days to actually get its cargo up, or discharging of cargo, would never fuel itself in India. Why? Fuel is very expensive, more than 30% more expensive than it is in Dubai or in Singapore. So why would the ship find it interesting at all? The second thing is, if there is any kind of a breakdown, and if any kind of spares and maintenance are required, they will not procure from India until and unless it becomes like a downtime. So once again, we are looking at a scenario that ships do come and go, but they do not care anything more beyond that. So the ecosystem is not helping them. The third thing is, if a ship is bringing any of these products, and the customs point was brought out by Arijit, we faced it personally, that we had to send back that thing because it was attracting 70% duty. Whereas the same thing, we routed it to Dubai and it was zero. So what I'm bringing point over here is, and there have been issues where the entire ecosystem, the ship owners bring in the goods, the port authorities have some issues out of it, and the people who are waiting for the goods, there is a dispute. Dispute can go for 90 days or more, which means the goods are lying somewhere. So we are actually running our entire major logistics based on certain things which we do not yet have any direct clarity or control, and we know for sure that it's not favoring any of this large transit that is happening either through. So there is very little through actually. In India, there is nothing is happening. Through is happening even with Colombo. It's happening through Dubai. It's happening to Hong Kong or Singapore. India is only in or out, and only when absolutely necessary. So we are not creating an infrastructure around this. While we may talk of inland logistics, but Suman just mentioned about river logistics, and I'm aware of it, that's getting a huge push. A couple of $1 billion are going behind it. But if you really want exciting ideas to get emerging out of India in the logistics, we have to make it tax-free for all the startups. like we got it in Singapore, 3 years. But did we get that in India? No. But is there a talk about it? I was told yes. So this has to be tightened up in some way we can make it possible. And the last point is someone about the company. Would you believe that any ships coming inside India, if it is a foreign ship, they have to switch off their VSAT equipment, which means by the time they enter Indian waters, they are on simple fleet broadband, which is good enough to send an email with a very small attachment, which means I'm losing complete tracking of the cargo, the ship's movement, and I'm depending on certain signals, radio signals, or small emails being sent. So with a coastline of thousands of kilometers, with an economy which is so large, with the potential that we all sit and policies that has been brought out, if some of these small areas could be tweaked, we found it's like a no-brainer. That's what we feel. And we are seeing our customers who are the ship owners, many times Indians or outside of India, most of them, they are actually struggling even to do their environmental certifications in India. So they prefer to cost and go to Greece or Dubai or any other place, but don't do the certifications. So here is what we saw, a very positive news. We saw Indian Register of Shipping taking a leadership role. They are actually coming up with so many new digitalization possibilities. So I'm glad to see some silver lining, but at the same time, it was important that I bring out some of these points, which could be kind of very easy to do, and we would see much more transit of these major shipping lines coming from India, coming up, and from otherwise. The last point, Suman, sorry, I may take 30 seconds more, is the average fleet age of an Indian ship is 19 years. What does it say? That Indian ship owners are not investing in new ships, and we are somehow making do with very old ships. And as a result, our maritime logistics trade is not yet been considered or taken seriously by the European nations or North or South Americas or rest of Asia, right? So that speaks about our major logistics part, where out of the $20 trillion of global shipping or the quantum of trade happening, we are not even probably 2.5% or maybe less than that. So yeah, that was the point.
That's a very startling number that you've placed out, that our average age of the ships are one of the highest in the world, and that may be because a lot of the Indian owners are possibly not even registering their ships in India for some of the issues that we heard before. They are preferring to register them in Panama or in Greece or other places, and we know that's for sure, because a lot of the Indian owners don't have ships that have the Indian flags. So we are about 2 minutes off from the time, and I would like to just take a quick 30 seconds with each one of you. And I will start with first you. You ended up with this, Joy, so I will start with you. If there was so my question is a little bit of a wishing in the future. I started asking you with the one point that you have, and the one point of making India competitive, cutting down the logistics cost as a percentage while keeping the growth of the industry and playing a significant role in the overall Indian growth in GDP and resurgence of the Indian industry post-COVID. One point that came out, and I wanted you to all comment upon it, is that during COVID, 75% of our logistics companies in India became vulnerable. And we know that that's going to stay longer than possibly the virus. With the industries that you are representing, what is that one thing that you think, given the topography, given the challenge that we have in India, that you would like to see to take this sector, these companies, the vulnerability of these companies away? Over to you first, Joy, if you can make a quick comment, a few seconds comment rather.
Yeah, so since it's 30 seconds, what we realized is, having gone through this pandemic ourselves and being in this sector, we realized having a single source of truth, which does not leave all the ecosystems in silo, was a big way that we realized it could actually bring in a lot more information transparently.
Okay, perfect. Single source of truth. Vijay, what is that that you would ask for? can't get Vijay in. So Arijit, what is that one thing that you would ask for?
So, Suman, I would say that the different ministries have to talk and coordinate with each other more, specifically with the new faceless assessments that they have come out with in the financial sector, for example. The objective of this faceless assessment was to introduce a seamless approval process. What is happening on ground is that because the field officers are, they lack the expertise or knowledge to
But I
assess the
understand, Joy.
products.
Arijit, I need to cut you
Yeah,
in because I know
sure,
we're over time. You're
sure.
talking about the coordination part of it.
Coordination
Shamsher,
for
if you can hear us, maybe a last
Yes, I can
comment
hear
from
you.
you and
So, yeah, so the vulnerable part of the logistics industry has been the small fleet operators. So I think some kind of easing of the financing environment there by providing a moratorium for the next 12 to 18 months will really help.
Okay, Vijay, last thoughts?
Yeah, I think some amount of customs reforms that we had flagged up, if it comes through, our exporters would benefit hugely.
Okay, so thanks again. I know I don't know who from the government is part of this. They're listening in, but I'm sure IMI will send out a report which will be read by the mandarins in the various state and the central government, and we will see their action. But nevertheless, great listening to all of you. There were some questions. We didn't have time for that, but hopefully some other day. And I hand you over back to Manmeet for closing the session.
Thank you so much, everyone, for such an insightful discussion. We would like to thank our title partner, Here Technologies, Power partner, Pando Corporation, brought to you by partner Grey Orange, supported by Logistics Skill Council, our registration partner, MapMy India, CX partner, Zendesk, session partner, Shiplight, silver part of Fretron, knowledge partner, Supply Chain Labs, and industry partner, PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We will catch you all once again for another exciting session. Another thank you goes out to all our esteemed panelists and all the audience for putting out such interesting questions. Thank you so much, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It was a pleasure.
One for the
Bye.
coordination. Thank
Stay
you,
safe.
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.